welcome to our online viewers. Our guest tonight is Jeff VanBendegom. I'm going to give him a minute to get comfortable here. Normally people see Jeff behind the piano, but we have been able to pull him out here to visit with us tonight, and I'm so glad that we did. He's got a microphone there, and I'm just going to dive right in. Jeff, you're so recognizable to many of us from playing at the 8, 9, 10, 11 Wednesday special events, but for those who may be new or who might not recognize you, please go ahead and just tell us your name, tell us the people and pets who live with you, and tell us where you go to work every day.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. So, Jeff VanBendegom, and you know me from playing piano like all the time, except when I'm at work. And I'm here with my lovely wife, Martha, who is also on the church council, and my children, Claudia, who's 15, and Audrey, who's 12, and my mom and dad, Mike and Darlene. My mom spoke eloquently here a few weeks ago, sharing her faith journey.
We have a fluffy golden doodle named Otto, so you mentioned pets. And I am an emergency medicine physician and an associate professor in medicine, so I work at Meriter Hospital.
And when my family first came here and I saw you and heard you play, I thought, sure, you were a professional pianist, and then learned that you're an emergency room doctor in addition to the way that you play piano, and then learned that you have a bunch of other interests. I think God gave Jeff more than 24 hours in a day. I don't know if any of you know other people like that, but Jeff, tell us some of your other interests.
Well, running, which we'll talk about in a moment, and I race cars as well, an avid skier and cyclist.
Don't you cook as well? Did I hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in his spare time he cooks. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about running tonight and that journey for you. And it's not just a running 2-3 miles here and there, dabbling. You don't generally, at least from what I understand, dabble in a lot of stuff. You really embrace it and become very, very good and very competitive. So tell us, if we take running specifically, tell us what got you interested in running. In addition to the obvious physical benefits, what are some of the mental health benefits that you have found from running? And tell us what that journey has been like for you as it relates to your faith as well.
Thanks. That's actually why I wanted to talk. So I started running when I started a little bit in college and then in medical school. My roommate through college and medical school, we studied together, and he was very disciplined, and he'd say, okay, well, we've studied, now we are going to leave and we're going to go running for 45 minutes, and that's how we're going to digest what we just learned. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I'd ran track briefly in high school, but was so busy with music that I had to give up that pursuit. And I found that when I'd leave my environment, I'd leave studying or leave whatever stressful thing I was doing, and I'd go running, my mind would kind of release, and I could ruminate on what I had just learned or what I had just seen. I would memorize it, I would understand it better. I've memorized music by going for a run and just kind of picturing the music and hearing it in my head, or memorizing things that I've read about just by going out and clearing my head and taking those deep breaths and getting one foot in front of the other. So that's how it started.
And when you think about running as it relates to your faith, what are some parallels that you see? If you take training for a marathon and sort of your faith journey, are there any similarities to that, or what similarities do you see?
Well, there's no accident. I mean, when I was researching for this talk, there's more than 20 different mentions in both the New and the Old Testament about running. So it's an analogy to a lot of things in life. You know, running for a prize, or are you running towards something, you're running from something. Isaiah 40 talk about looking to the Lord for strength, and you will run and not grow weary. God will be your strength. You will fly on the wings of an eagle. The passage starts with talking about running and not losing strength. And that doesn't start by just getting off the couch and going. It's something you build towards. So I see that as part of the faith journey. And I definitely personally connect through God when I'm out and about. You see things, hear things, smell things, notice things. When I'm out on a run, whether it's 5 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock at night, more often morning. But there's animals you see and flowers and people and things, and just more of the world that you interact with intimately when you're out on a run.
When you arrive at a marathon, one of the things that you mentioned is noticing different goals that people have. You know, some might be running for time, some might be running just to finish. Tell us a little bit about different goals that you see people have.
So, one of the things that I've learned, I personally enjoy running because it is a release. You mentioned the mental health component. Being an emergency medicine physician is a stressful job, and, it's hard not to take on the worries and concerns of every patient every day. It's very fast paced, and sometimes to slow it down, I'll go for a run, and it helps me to kind of resolve things, think through things. And I think that settles my mind and helps me be calm when I come back home and come back inside. What I found in running races, for me personally, I'm extremely goal-oriented. So to train for a marathon gives me something tangible and something to work towards. I'm pleased that my body has allowed me to do this, and even at my age, I've just completed my 30th marathon a couple of weeks ago. But what I found is that I've run marathons on trails in northern Wisconsin, and I've run Chicago, and before the pandemic I was fortunate enough to run both Boston and New York marathons in the same year. So I've seen marathons at different scales and met a lot of people in the course of this. What I found is that we're all lining up on the start line. We might be running the same route, but everyone's running with their own goal. And it's been fascinating to me that even when I've been to Boston in an elite corral, I've been in New York, and the people that I meet have the same insecurities. They're running the same race, but they're not running for the same goals. They're all trying to finish. I know that meeting my goal doesn't come at the expense of somebody else. I'm not taking a gold medal away from somebody. I can finish in the same time as someone else, and it doesn't change anyone else's goals or their ideals. I was on the way to the start line in New York, and they bus 50,000 people out to Staten Island to start the race. It's a logistical nightmare. And running that race is kind of like the running equivalent of driving through Brooklyn and through Manhattan. It's a crazy race. But the gentleman that I met as I was on the bus and the ferry out to Staten Island was almost half my age, and I said, well, what brought you to run New York? And the guy had been in a hospital bed with leukemia and had gotten chemotherapy and thought, he was in his 20s and in the prime, of his life physically, and thought, oh my God, how can I ever be healthy again? And he was in bed getting chemo, and he looked up and he saw the New York Marathon happening on television, and he thought, if I could do that, I could see myself as healthy again. So I thought, whatever running ills or woes I had when I was lining up in the start line, whatever I was worried about was not the same as the guy who's running to recover he's running from leukemia, and he's running towards healthiness. It was amazing.
Different perspectives, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing you had mentioned, working in the emergency room, obviously, and high stress job, especially right now and over the last 18 months to 2 years. And what I think a lot of us are reading about and coming to understand is that sometimes people who are brought to the ER might be having more of a mental health crisis than they are really a physical crisis. And we could probably talk about this in particular for days and days and days. But how, as we talk about, as we've devoted this month and these Wednesdays to sort of touching on mental health awareness, what do you wish we, as people who aren't in the emergency room every day, what do you wish we knew about some of the things that you're seeing right now come through?
I think people, when in times of stress, whether it's a micro stress or a macro stress, something placed on you by the world like COVID and a pandemic, something that you place on yourself, people rely on whatever crutches they have. And if you do something and you stay after it, you turn it into a habit. And if that habit is something like running or exercise, it doesn't mean that anybody listening to this talk has to run 30 marathons to be healthy, but it allows you to then, in a period of stress, rely on something that's formed a habit. If that habit is having a couple of drinks to settle down, then you're probably going to have more than a couple of drinks when you're in a period of stress. And so one of the things we've seen that's been an unexpected toll from COVID is that there's been more drug overdose. Some days I'm giving more overdose medication to opiate and heroin users than I am to COVID patients, because there's so many people that are relying on poor behaviors, poor coping mechanisms. We all have our positive and our negative coping mechanisms. Just trying to bring to light what my positive coping mechanisms are. So it's been a real struggle for the patients, I think, to deal with the stress of mental health toll that COVID has taken.
And I know in the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much appreciation and love and gratitude that came your way for the frontline workers and for first responders. And much like there's sort of crisis fatigue, right? Like people just get so tired of living in sort of crisis mode. I've read that there's sort of appreciation fatigue. And so you and your peers aren't being as, people's gratitude has waned. And so I say for myself, and I imagine everyone in here, thank you for the work that you're doing and keeping people well and healthy. And thank you for being here today to help us talk about it and to better understand it. In closing, the Oprah question, what do you know for sure, Jeff VanBendegom?
I know that God is with us, even when we don't think He is. I know that each of us is stronger than we give ourselves credit for being. Whether that means running one more mile than you thought you could, maybe it's just taking one more step off the couch than you thought you could, maybe it's doing one good thing instead of one bad thing, regardless of what that decision is. Each of us is stronger than we give ourselves credit for.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks.